Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven, at the helm this evening. I want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And we are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. And I have returned from the Mind Control Summit 3, which transpired last weekend in Vegas. To all of those who made it out to attend, I want to thank you very much. It was a great summit with incredible expert presenters and a wellspring of information. And I was at the summit contributing as an expert presenter, so if you're interested, please contact Lori and Fenton for more information pertaining to a pay-per-view broadcast from the expert presenters. And if you, like I said, if you missed the summit, this will be an excellent way to catch up. So thank you all for tuning in last week. I had a pre-recorded show, which I hope you enjoyed listening to. And of course, you are listening to Studio A. And my special guest this evening is remote viewer specialist Dr. Courtney Brown, Ph.D. Courtney Brown is a mathematician and social scientist who teaches in the Department of Political Science at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Excuse me. Independent of his work at the university, he is also the leading scholar on the subject of remote viewing, as it is done using procedures that were developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes, or procedures that are derivative of those methodologies. Courtney Brown received his Ph.D. from Washington University, St. Louis in 1982 in political science with an emphasis on mathematical modeling. And Dr. Brown is the director and founder of the Farsight Institute, www.farsight.org, a nonprofit research and educational organization dedicated to the study of phenomenon of non-local consciousness known as remote viewing. His recently published book on the subject, Remote Viewing, The Science and Theory of Non-Physical Perception, is the only book of its kind where the science of remote viewing is developed with respect to highly structured data collection methodologies. In this book, he analyzes data and develops a new theory that explains the remote viewing phenomenon as a consequence of superposition formation on the quantum level. And let's see here. His websites are www.CourtneyBrown.com and www.farsight.org. And I believe there is also a www.farsightpresentations.com. So please welcome Courtney to the show this evening. Courtney, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Solaris, for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on board tonight and staying up with us this late hour.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And of course, everybody's so familiar with you over here at the station and elsewhere. So I don't know how much you want to backtrack insofar as how you got involved in remote viewing, but I'd like to know what you're currently working on, if there's any recent projects you can discuss about the remote viewing.
Well, we're always doing a new project, but there's an absolute impossibility of talking about it before it's done. The remote viewing sessions are in progress right now, so no one can know anything about what the project is or the target is except me.
Cool.
Otherwise, the remote viewers would know it, and the entire project would be closed up. I mean, it would be a complete bust. So
yeah.
we'd waste absolutely everything. So. But I can tell you that it's going to be a great one, and you're going to be really interested in hearing all the latest about it when it actually comes out, hopefully in a couple months.
Excellent. Well, maybe you can give us a recap insofar as what your most recent project was that you can talk about.
Absolutely. We actually have done a couple recent ones. One was on the underwater civilization that's now underwater on Atlantis that is actually, we have really good Google Earth imagery for it, and there's been new sonar data that's been around that's coming out with regard to a similar type of anomaly under the water off the coast of Malibu. So there's really good solid evidence for a past civilization that was quite technologically advanced, more advanced than us by about 100 years. Mm-hmm. And it was destroyed, or it destroyed itself about 70,000 years ago. And then the most recent project we just did was the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is the largest pyramid in Giza, Egypt. And we were focusing on how that was actually built, because the mainstream archaeological ideas of how it was built are just plain absolutely certifiably crazy. Mm-hmm. And so we were just interested in how it was actually built. And so we finished that project, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and we have a documentary about it, and we also have a free video that's available on our website, farsight.org, F-A-R-S-I-G-H-T, like seeing far.org, O-R-G, because we're a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And so we have a full documentary that's an hour and 45 minutes long, but we also have a 40-minute announcement video that's right on our homepage that has about 25 minutes of the documentary in it, where you can see some of the verifiable components of it. The big issue with remote viewing for this project especially, the Great Pyramid of Giza, was two things. Not just to use it operationally as a means of collecting data to find out about a mystery, how something was actually done, such as building the pyramid, but also to finally silence for any reasonable person the big debate about how remote viewing, or if remote viewing is actually real. That's the big bugaboo, because if we have these projects on an ancient civilization that actually wasn't so ancient, only 70,000 years ago, on Earth, and then we have good data on on extraterrestrial involvement, in fact, in the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza and the pyramid complex. Well, that's one thing to say that we have this remote viewing data, but if people are not willing to accept that remote viewing is real in the first place, then the whole projects go down the drain. So what we did with this project in particular is upgrade what we do to present the remote viewing, which is our best remote viewer is literally the best on the planet, Dick Allgeier and Daz Smith, trained to be able to do their sessions live on video. And this is an important thing, standing up on whiteboards in an theatrically entertaining manner, meaning it's not like watching the grass grow. They're facing the camera, they're talking, they're animated, they're explaining what's going on. And the remote viewing quality is done under totally blind conditions, meaning they're not told anything about the target before they actually do the remote viewing. They're never told, and they don't know that the project is about the Great Pyramid of Giza, or they don't know anything about the particular aspects of the thing that they're supposed to be perceiving. They're doing it totally blind. And when they do it, the descriptions that they bring in that are recorded live on video with no one else in the rooms except themselves, they set up the cameras themselves and so on, the quality of the remote viewing data, the descriptions of what was actually going on in terms of the verifiable aspects that you can actually compare with the stuff we see on the ground today so you know it's correct, is as good as if they were there physically and saw it with their own eyes and then came back to tell us about it. It's that good. So there's no ambiguity anymore about whether remote viewing is actually real, because you can watch it, and when you watch it, it's a jaw-dropping experience, because any reasonable person, now there are some unreasonable people, but any reasonable person that watches that will simply say, oh my gosh, so this is real. So this remote viewing stuff is really, really, really real. And so that was a big deal. So the Great Pyramid of Giza does two things. It describes how the pyramid was built, so the mystery is resolved, and how it was actually done. And our findings are completely matching what we see on the ground today in terms of the pyramid. And mainstream archaeological ideas totally do not make any sense with respect to what we see on the ground today. So our findings are in total match with the data, what we actually see on the ground, and the mainstream archaeological ideas really can be discounted because they're impossible. So, this is a really solid study, and you can see the remote viewing in action. You don't have to believe somebody, you don't have to look at pieces of paper or scans of pieces of paper where you see doodles and trying to interpret it. This is really the highest level of remote viewing that's ever been achieved. And it's done by the best remote viewers on the planet. And watching it is literally a jaw-dropping experience. So for those of your listeners who haven't yet watched it, it's a historic event to actually see it with your own eyes. And 20, 30, 40 years from now, they're going to be talking about this project, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the documentary that came out from it being the thing that eventually changed the way humanity thought about both nonlinear consciousness and remote viewing and a whole bunch of stuff. And, it doesn't mean that humanity has changed now, but in 20, 30 years when remote viewing is widely accepted, they're going to look back at this study and say, this was the tipping point. This is the study that showed how it should be done. And so, it's really a really path-breaking stuff. And also it sets the standard for all the stuff we do in the future.
Right.
So when other remote viewers want to work with us, they know what the levels are that we are working with. So, you can't just be sort of a slapdash remote viewer that took a couple courses and can draw doodles on a piece of paper. You have to be able to describe things really well, mm-hmm. and have some artistic capabilities as well. We've noticed that some of the best remote viewers are artists. So you can perceive anything, but you've got to be able to describe what you perceive, so you have to be able to draw it.
Right.
And so Daz Smith, for example, is a professional graphics artist. That's what he does for a living. And Dick Allgaier just happens to be a really good sketcher, a really good drawer. His drawings are just plain excellent. Mm-hmm. And so we have really good drawing capabilities combined with the absolute best remote viewing capabilities and a new means of presentation, new means of presenting this stuff. So it's not ambiguous anymore. So the announcement leading up to the release of this documentary had words like conclusive, unambiguous, proof, and really that was not an oversell. This documentary really brings remote viewing to that level.
Mm-hmm. I very much agree with you on that one. And insofar as these remote viewers go, how do they acquire their data? How is the transmission received?
Well, that's a very interesting question. You've not asked me that before. This is an issue dealing with physics, and it's actually important for people to understand it because it's not unattainable physics. It's actually physics that is people can understand. Basically, physicists have never found anything solid in the entire universe. You can look at your desk and your body and your house and so on, your apartment, your car, and so on. You say, hey, that looks pretty solid to me. But it's mostly empty space with molecules. And inside the molecules is empty space with atoms. And inside the atoms is empty space with subatomic particles. And it goes on and on. And the farther you go into it, the more you realize that physicists have never discovered any solid billiard ball type thing that's solid. So there is no solid anything. The only thing that they have ever discovered is waves, frequency, energy. They've never discovered anything except waves. And so the entire universe is a frequency-based universe. It is not based on solid things like planets, suns, stars, houses, people that are solid, indivisible things. It's all frequencies. That's the only thing that anyone has ever discovered. So when you are looking at yourself in the mirror, you're not looking at a solid thing. You're looking at a bunch of frequencies that are interacting among themselves. Now, there's only two processes there's only two processes that go on in the creation of the entire universe. And those processes are called constructive and destructive interference. And that means when frequencies or waves interact with themselves, if you have a peak hitting another peak, they add together and become a bigger peak, that's called constructive interference. And if you have a peak of one wave hitting the trough of another wave, the bottoming out, they cancel out and you get nothing. So that's called destructive interference. The entire universe is based on just those two processes. And for example, if you go to a piano keyboard and hit middle C, bong, and then hit B right next to it, bong, well, if you put them both together, you'll hear a sound that's like a wobbling, wah, 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 wah. That wah, 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 wah sound is actually the interference between those two frequencies. Now, if you hit middle C, bong, and then the highest key on the keyboard, ding, you won't really hear anything because there is still interference going on between the two waves, but the waves are so different from each other, so far apart in frequency, that they really don't interfere with each other very much. So it's like nothing to write home about. So waves that are close to each other or similar to each other interfere with each other a lot and produce these things. Now, what happens when you have frequencies that are sort of near each other, and a whole bunch of them, and they're all canceling each other out? Well, you get a vacuum. So a vacuum actually is not empty. A vacuum is actually filled with energy, but everything's being canceled out. Now, what happens when you have waves that are combining so that they're not all canceling out? That's constructive interference. Then you'll get what's called a wave packet or a bunch of waves combining, producing a distortion in what we call space-time. And that distortion looks like a bump. Now you can think of this distortion similar to the way a snake looks when it eats a rat. So it eats a big rat, and you see a bulge in the snake. Well, that bulge is like the distortion in space-time, and these waves that are interacting produce a distortion or a bulge in space, and that bulge is called a wave packet. And so basically the idea is that the only thing that exists are bulges in space-time that we call wave packets, and our entire body are made up of those things. Our computers are made up of those things. Our houses are made up of those things. So there is no particles or solid things. There's just wave packets. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, what you're looking at is a vast and highly complicated ensemble of wave packets, or what physicists might want to call superposition ensembles, or superpositions. Or superpositions are these waves that are in combination to each other, producing this wave packet in a state of existence known as a superposition. And so basically what happens is that's the only thing that exists in the universe, these superposition ensembles. And planets are superposition ensembles, or combinations of these wave packets. And stars are, the whole galaxy is. So what we are, when we're actually looking at each other, we're actually signals, frequency signals, very similar to a radio band. And a radio band can tune in to one frequency, and you listen to that frequency, your favorite station, listening to the favorite songs that you like to listen to. And there are other frequencies going on, and the radio is screening those other frequencies out so that you only hear your one station. So what that basically means is that our brains are highly sophisticated hologram generators, meaning there's frequencies of everything going on right now. And our brains select out only the frequencies that it wants us to perceive. For example, on an evolutionary basis, you don't need to see the gazelle that was there yesterday when you're out in the wilderness, and you don't need to see the elephant that's going to be there tomorrow. What you need to see is the lion that's staring in front of you right today. So the brain screens out the gazelle and screens out the lion, screens out the elephant, and it lets you see only the lion. So you're here in the here and now, and then you can defend yourself. So the point is that our brains screen out everything that we don't see and allow in everything that we do see. And that includes hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, all the senses. And so what remote viewers are doing is they have trained their brains, trained their minds through years of work and getting good at these procedures to let in a few frequencies that the brain normally would screen out. And it's like anything. If you're an Olympics athlete, those Olympic athletes train their bodies so that they can do things that you and I cannot do. But they train for years to be able to get their bodies to do those things. If you play the piano like Lang Lang, and you're playing in Carnegie Hall, well, you're getting the fingers to do things that other people simply cannot do through training. And so the body and the mind is somewhat flexible in being able to do things that it normally would not do, but you have to work at it. And so we have mastered ways to get the cooperation working with the brain to let those things in. So what happens is when remote viewers get really good, the brain relaxes and it knows it's okay to let those other things in. And those other frequencies do come in, and in fact, people observe them and then perceive things. So what the brain is actually doing is it's letting in frequencies that represent places, past, future, and present, anywhere in the universe that that are resonating with a certain frequency, and it's letting those frequencies in so that the remote viewers in their minds can actually witness them, can see them. So this actually brings up another very interesting aspect of remote viewing. If part of the brain is letting in those frequencies, the only way anything can interact with anything else, period, Solaris, is if you are vibrating in a compatible way. So in a sense, in a very literal sense, when a remote viewer is remote viewing, say, the Battle of Gettysburg, part of that remote viewer is actually vibrating in a way that's compatible. It's putting itself in a state of superposition with the Battle of Gettysburg. So part of that remote viewer's consciousness is actually at the Battle of Gettysburg. It's not like getting the information through a long-distance telegram. It's actually there. That's the only way information can actually be passed. You can only interact with something if you're compatible or close on the level of frequency, and you enter into a state of superposition with that thing. So if you're looking at the Battle of Gettysburg as a remote viewer, you've got to vibrate as the Battle of Gettysburg. It's not like the frequencies are being translated and brought to your current state. You've got to match up. And so that's the trick that the brain actually pulls off, and it's really a very sophisticated trick. And so what you're actually doing is leaving part of yourself at the target. And we do, in fact, have numerous experiences where remote viewers have reported that they see other remote viewers at the target site. And they were not told in advance that the other remote viewers had ever been to that site or ever been given that site. Or the remote viewers might have been there, in a session that took place 5 years previously. So, and the current remote viewers were never told that, and they'll report, hey, why is so-and-so here, standing behind me or something. So we have numerous experiences like that. So when you remote view something, you're actually merging with that thing, and you're leaving part of yourself there. And that's how remote viewing works. In a very brief nutshell, that's how remote viewing works. And it's also the basis, it's the theoretical and scientific basis for how extraterrestrial spacecraft get from place to place, how they can travel here in what appears to be the complete violation of classical and relativistic physics. Because, when they travel hundreds of light years in just a very short period of time, it seems like it's impossible to do that. Well, the reality is our understanding of both quantum mechanics and relativistic physics is 100 years old. And there has been absolutely no advances or changes in the fundamentals of those two paradigms for 100 years. So, they do work, especially relativistic physics, within a subset of phenomena, within a subset of reality, and the calculations have improved. We're much better at calculating now. I'm a mathematician, so I'm really in love with the math of both quantum mechanics and relativistic physics. But it only applies within a subset of the larger wide-angle understanding of what constitutes physical reality.
Right. It's interesting when you're talking about leaving part of yourself at the target. So I guess that would create kind of a ghost record or an after image. Now, my question to you...
That's exactly right.
Well, it's interesting because now it reminds me of, okay, so we have, quote unquote, say we have off-world technology or extraterrestrial intelligence. So if they're using that same technique or method, are we seeing an after image of the craft, or are we seeing something in real time?
Well, you mean when we physically see like UFOs?
Right, or even when somebody, I don't know if you guys have actually tried to remote view anything like that, but it would be interesting to see what exactly people are looking at. I mean, maybe it's just a holographic image of some kind.
Well, when you actually physically see a UFO, you're actually watching a spacecraft that has been frequency adjusted to be able to interact with and see what we see. So the only way a UFO can appear physical is if it enters into a state of superposition with our reality.
Okay.
And when it goes out of visibility, so it just blinks, and we have lots of reported examples of UFOs being visible physically and on radar, and then traveling, halfway across the sky and suddenly disappearing and gone on radar as well as visibly, and then popping up again somewhere else on the sky. So there's lots of examples of that. And what basically is happening is they're making frequency adjustments. You make a frequency adjustment and you you simply don't see them anymore. So it's not really cloaking, but you can think of it as cloaking because we can't see them anymore. And we can presume that any spacecraft or any civilization that can make such a spacecraft would also have translation stuff so that they'd be able to continue to watch through, say, computer monitors, screens, to continue to watch us, even though we can't see them.
Right.
So you can just assume that if they can adjust the frequencies of their ships, they're not going to stop watching us. They're going to, if they want to sort of disappear in our skies, they're going to want to keep on watching us, and so they'll have it up on a computer display somewhere, and you can assume that they know how to do that.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And also, it seems to me like the remote viewing is kind of the wave of the future insofar as a future of communication, perhaps, or a new language. What do you think about that?
Well, it's yes and no.
Okay.
It's yes because that's what the rest of the world does, and the rest of the universe does. It's very clear in all of the UFO abduction literature that extraterrestrials that are interacting with humans have very clear remote viewing and telepathic capabilities that is just normal for them. And it's we humans who have the limitations of not being able to do that so easily. We can do it, but it takes a lot of training to be good at it. But extraterrestrials apparently don't even blink. I mean, and that's how they communicate among themselves, especially when you're dealing with different civilizations and different species. They don't have to go through like verbal translator programs. They can convey thoughts. And so, so why is it sort of not the future for us? Because we are a species that is specially designed to have limitations. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. It's the rest of the species don't have these limitations, and we are designed to allow people to experience those limitations. So there's nothing stopping you from being born into a civilization that doesn't have these limitations. I once interacted with a lady who is a sister of a friend of mine, and she was saying, when I finish this life here, I'm never coming back here. This is crazy shit. This is stupid stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be born and be one of those, ETs and have all the clear telepathic capabilities and stuff like that. I mean, advanced stuff. And I just looked at her and I said, gosh, you missed the whole point. Why do you think you came here in the first place? That's probably where you came from. You came here in order to experience the limitations. It's so cool to be here. I mean, you interact with everybody with a total memory loss. You don't remember anybody. Like you and I, Solaris, probably have known each other for hundreds and thousands of years. We've never remembering any of that. So it's like we're meeting for the first time. Solaris, like, what's happening? What's going on? Like, what are you doing? What's your life? And we completely forget that we, knew each other for, millennia. And so you meet everybody for the first time, and also you don't have these remote viewing and telepathic easy capabilities. So you have to rely on physical language, and it's like climbing Mount Everest. Anybody can get that high up. You just get into an aircraft, a jet airplane, and just take a flight somewhere, and you're 35,000 feet. But people don't want to do that. They want to get on a backpack, and they want to climb Mount Everest. It's the challenge of the limitations, and then when people go bungee jumping, anybody can, can take an elevator up and down, but it's really exciting when you just have a rope around your ankle and you throw yourself off the edge of a building and you're bungee jumping. I mean, it's the limitations of having only the rope. When you're skiing, anybody can play in the snow, but to go skiing with just two sticks on your ground and going, huge speeds, that's like, it's the limitations of it that makes it so much fun. So when we come here and want to be humans, we actually represent what some species call us as the masters of limitations. I mean, to them, we're amazing. And it's scary for them to watch us. That's like saying, oh my gosh, how could they actually do that? I mean, look at that. They're surviving, and they don't have any of these telepathic or remote viewing easy capabilities. So for them, like, we're like we're like the Fantastic Four amazing superheroes to be able to do this type of thing. And many extraterrestrials are frightened to death to try to become humans. I mean, they can just be born here, but like they're scared to death. And so, when I say is remote viewing and telepathy sort of our future, well, our destiny is to be able to do what other species do with these easy capabilities of remote viewing and telepathy and so on, but without that, to be able to master who we are with these limitations, to truly be the masters of limitations. And so I really think our future, our destiny, and you asked really, where is our future? What's our destiny? I think our future, our destiny, is to be an educative example for the universe in a very real sense. Meaning, I honestly do believe that in the future, people do say, remember, we've demonstrated that everything is simultaneous, past, present, and future. So I can say that not that people will say, but people in the future do say that, if humans could do it, could discover themselves and evolve, and if they could master their own limitations to develop their society to become a wondrous civilization, if humans can do it, then that gives hope for absolutely everybody. So if humans can do it, then we can do it. I think that's honestly what the whole galaxy is going to be saying, or is saying in the future. And that I honestly think, I'm not exaggerating, I honestly think that in the future, people seek us out because they wonder if we could be true or if we're mythological. Meaning, could it really be that a civilization that had so much negativity in it, and the participants in the civilization didn't know how to perceive things across time and space, like with remote viewing, and hardly any telepathic capabilities? Could it be that they actually survived and actually became enlightened and discovered who they were? And is it sort of like, is it a Robin Hood thing? Is it did Robin Hood really exist, or was it just fake? I actually think people seek us out just in order to see if we were actually real. And that we actually become the phrase, if they could do it, we can do it, to everywhere. So I think that's our future. So our future is not necessarily to become like the other extraterrestrials with these clear telepathic and remote viewing capabilities, because those things are already out there. That's what everybody has. I mean, that's the 99% of everybody in the galaxy. We're the 1%, and the whole 99% is looking at us in amazement. And literally, I have to say this, and I'm not exaggerating even the slightest, I honestly believe that however big your human audience is here, I actually do believe that there are millions of planets, not just beings, but planets, listening to this show and listening to shows you do, Solaris. Because this show is literally the cutting edge of what will turn out to be the complete transformation of our planetary society. Because you can't get the stuff that we're talking about here on CNN or the New York Times. All the mainstream stuff's been shut out. So it's from you and from your show and from places like this that all that change is going to come out of. And I just know that the entire galaxy is like looking. Your name may be known by more people in the galaxy than Obama's name is known by people on Earth. I mean, that's the type of situation we're dealing with. So you may think that your audience is relatively small relative to ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, things, Fox News, Fox, and so on. But in terms of absolute numbers, I would be absolutely astounded if your numbers galactic-wide didn't top CNN by a huge margin.
Oh, well, thank you. And of course, Courtney, that would say you must be out there too then. I'm sure they have you on their radar.
Well, I hope so. I try to be entertaining. I actually do keep it in mind that, no matter how big the human audience is, there's a galactic audience that's way bigger, and they are watching. So you always want to remember that everything in life is theater.
Yeah, that's very true. Yep, indeed. Well, that's very interesting what you were talking about. And, one thing that always stirs my mind is when you talk about the remote viewing sessions, and then I think I've asked you before if you actually go back after a while and revisit these remote viewing sites to go deeper to another level to acquire more data. But do you ever do that?
Yeah, actually, we do it so commonly. It's actually part of our projects now. Meaning,
excellent.
When we send a viewer to a target, they come in with the data that they have. And in the old days, that would be it. And we'd send other viewers to get more information if they could or not. But our procedures have evolved to the point now where, let's say they remote view something and they get something that's of interest, but we'd want them to expand on that thing of interest. Well, we then send them a non-leading email that tells them only something that they themselves received or perceived in their sessions, and say, on page 18 of your session from this date, and I usually attach the session so there's absolutely no ambiguity of which session we're talking about. You describe this. Could you please expand on that? End of email. And then they do another session where they focus just on that. Because you have to understand, when a remote viewer is assigned to a target, the targeting mechanism is such that it places the remote viewer's perception at a certain spot in time and space. That doesn't guarantee that they're going to see what you want them to see. Mm-hmm. For example, if you tell somebody to go into a room and say, go in there and look around that room and come back and tell me what you find. And they go into a room and they come back out and they say, well, I saw a bed, there was a dresser, also a closet, there was clothes in the closet, there were some pictures and stuff there was a carpet on the floor and so on. Now, let's say you're interested in the shoes that are in the closet. But they mentioned the closet, but they didn't mention the shoes, but that's what you really want to know. Okay, so then we tell them in a non-leading email, all right, so you're reporting that there is a closet with stuff in the closet. Please go back and explore that. And so, you see, when you place them in time and space with the targeting mechanism, their eyeballs, they're sort of, psychic eyeballs, are at a certain spot, but there's no guarantee they're going to see any particular thing that you want to see. They're just there. And it's like any type of eyewitness in a crime scene. The police detectives say, well, you were there. You must know X, Y, and Z. What did you see? There's no guarantee that that the witness actually saw what the detectives need to be witnessed. Mm-hmm. So you're locating them in a time and space, but they're not telling them exactly what you want them to see. You're just saying you're in a spot, and then you're sort of leaving it up to them to report back whatever they see at that spot. Mm-hmm. And so when they come back, you look at what they report back, you look through the data, and then you say, oh, okay, well, they got close to what we needed when they saw this thing. So let's send them back to look at that thing and explore around that thing. And then they go back and they start exploring. And sure enough, when they come back, in the room example I was using, they're exploring the closet. They, in fact, report the clothes that are in the closet. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of shoes at the bottom of the closet. And it looks like there's blue shoes and black shoes and white shoes and different types of shoes, men's shoes and women's shoes. And there's different dresses and other things. So they explore everything in the closet. And then they come back with that session. And that's what you needed. Mm-hmm. So you send them back to the exact spot, but you're not giving them any new information, any outside information. You're just repeating from their earlier session something that they report, and say, explore that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so we often do that. That's how, in fact, we get these sessions to be as detailed as they are, because we send them back multiple times and ask them to expand on something that they've already reported. But we can, if they don't report, let's use that room example one more time. if they don't report a closet with clothes or anything like that, we can't go back, we can't send them and say, okay, so you have a room, the room must have a closet, so go and investigate the closet. We can't say that. Mm-hmm. They have to actually say they saw a closet with stuff in it. Mm-hmm. And then we can say, okay, you're reporting a closet with stuff in it, explore that. Mm-hmm. So we, there can be nothing leading in the tasking process.
Nice.
It can be based just on what they report.
Right.
So yes, we do have them go back multiple times in order to sort these things out, because it's chasing the rabbit down the rabbit hole type of thing. Once they start on something, you've got to let them pursue it. And there's only so much you can do in one 1 hour session. Exhaustion takes over. So mm-hmm. you need to send them back, but also you need to give them some guidance for what you want. But the guidance cannot be something that you're thinking of. It has to be in the form of something that they have already witnessed.
Right. Let me ask you a question. So say the remote viewer goes tracks down a target somewhere, and then there's an imprint signature of them being there before, and they encounter that imprint again. But what if they were to remotely influence their own imprint signature that was there the first time and just use that as a remote?
Well, they typically don't. We don't have any experiences where people report their own imprints.
Okay.
Because once they go back, it's like they're used to themselves being in the session, mm-hmm. and being in the place, so they don't report themselves there from a session that took place the next day. We don't have any examples of something like that happening, and it's a good question. It's an interesting question. It may be that the brain sort of assimilates all that and sort of packages it all, and so it just sort of blends that into this thing. It's an interesting question you're asking, but yeah, they don't. That in fact, if it didn't do that, even when the remote viewer went the first time, it should see the imprints of themselves going back the next day, the second and third time. Meaning, the very first time, it should see the second and third time as well, because it would all happen simultaneously.
Right.
But we don't have any examples of that happening, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'm just guessing that the brain sort of synthesizes all that, making the brain is really good at making what we see coherent. That's why we see a reality in front of us that's not a blend of everything else in the past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. The brain is really good at sifting everything out to produce only one picture in front of us that we see as the reality of the now. So I'm assuming that the brain is pretty good at keeping the remote viewing perception somewhat organized as well.
Right, that makes perfect sense. And so obviously the remote viewers are alone. Do they ever go with someone else shadowing them during a session at all?
No.
Okay.
We have them always go in solo.
No guides? No. Like that.
Okay. And we don't have any monitors. We don't have anybody in the room filming. We don't have camera people in the room doing it. Mm-hmm. Typically, it's the remote viewers setting up the cameras themselves. And or if we do have camera people in the room, if it was being done for, say, a TV show, and the TV production people had their own camera people and they were insisting on doing that, the camera people would typically not know anything about the project. I mean, they would be just people that were assigned to record the actual process, the actual session, mm-hmm. but they wouldn't be people that knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. But typically for our projects that are done at the Farsight Institute, the remote viewers set up their own cameras and push the on button and then do the session. So it really took quite a level of training mm-hmm. to be able to do that in an entertaining manner, because these are people that aren't working with professional camera crews to sort of make that theater element work. They really had to learn how to do that themselves. I do videography professionally, so I'm able to give them lots of advice on that.
Oh, that's great. So let me ask you, in the past, I know, considering your background, have you ever used an EEG just to play with it and see what it does, what the brain does while somebody's remote viewing?
No, but it's a really good question. It points not to the undesirability of knowing that, but the lack of funds we have to do things like that. So there have been people who have wanted to connect up EEGs and so on, but there's a limitation of the number of people we have to work with in terms of the number of remote viewers. There's only a couple really world-class, there's only a few very world-class remote viewers, and we don't have any extra financial funds to rent an EEG machine or hire a technician to run it. And if we were doing that, the remote viewing with those special machines, we'd have to have a whole setup with people in a location. So these remote viewers are doing these things out of their own home. Mm-hmm. And so none of those resources that would be necessary to do what you're suggesting do we have. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, I do not know a single organization, regardless of cost, regardless of resources, that has done more to potentially change this planet for in a major redirecting way than what we have been doing with our projects at the Farsight Institute. Mm-hmm. with as few resources that we have. Meaning, you take all the resources of CNN, all the resources of the United Nations, all the resources of the U.S. government. I think they pale in comparison with what we've actually accomplished in terms of, say, 100 years from now, what society will be like. Will it really be, will it really reflect what's going on in the United Nations right now, or will it reflect fundamentally the change between now and what it will be like 100 years? Will it reflect the types of things that we've been working on at the Farsight Institute? And I really think people will look back and say, the projects that were being done at the Farsight Institute had more of an impact on the evolutionary trajectory of humanity over 100 years than anything done by the United Nations or the U.S. government or anything. Now, some people may say that's ludicrous, but I'm just saying wait 100 years. Let's see what our society looks like. Yeah. If remote viewing has fundamentally transformed the way people think about society and existence and extraterrestrial life and our place in the universe, then, it doesn't matter what President Obama's Afghanistan policy is. It's not going to have anywhere close to the impact of what we've been doing.
I totally agree with you, Courtney, and I hope you get the funding. I always like to push for that. And so, of course, if people want to support you, they go to the website. Do you have a donate button and all that good stuff?
Well, they do. Actually, there's two things people could do. One is totally free, and it really helps a lot. If we don't have, we're a nonprofit, so we don't have any money for putting advertisements in front of your face in order to tell you what we're doing. So we don't do that. But we do have a free newsletter. And if you go to our website at www.farsight.org, like seeing far, FARSIGHT.org, at the bottom of the navigation bar that's on the left, you'll see a blue banner, a blue box that says subscribe to our free newsletter. So if you click on that and put in your email address, we don't give out the email address to anyone for any reason, and we only send those things out like once a week or once every 2 weeks to let people know what's the latest. And it often includes the comic that is done by the celebrated comic artist Vic Guiza, called The Farsight Chronicles. That's really a great sort of entertaining way to sort of keep up with some of the stuff we're doing. And so if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get information of what we actually do. But yeah, if people actually donate to the Institute, that's really good. But even if they just watch the documentary, like the Great Pyramid of Giza or the Atlantis documentary, they're learning something about it themselves. And the documentaries are very economical. For example, we have them as video on demand as well as DVDs you get out of Amazon. But the video on demand, for example.
Are you there?
I'm sorry, I had to cough.
Okay.
Yeah, I muted myself for a second.
Okay.
Okay, but the video on demand, for example, is $12 to rent or $15 to purchase forever. And for the Great Pyramid of Giza, you're really helping, because all the money we get from those rentals, no one buys groceries on those things. We plow all that directly into the remote viewing stuff that we do. Besides, the Great Pyramid of Giza, if you watch that documentary, it not only helps support us, but it transforms your life. Because once you see that stuff with your own eyes, you're never the same.
And Courtney, we're heading for a break. We'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned. Ravenstar's Witching Hour.